Saturday evening, the world learned of a hard blow inflicted on the Hamas terrorist organization after a small, precise missile launched by an IDF drone struck a moving vehicle in Gaza City, carrying Ra'ad Saad, the second in command of Hamas's military operations in the Gaza Strip, and one of the senior architects of the October 7th massacre against Israel. Meanwhile, the Trump administration appears determined to move to phase B of the ceasefire agreement in 2 more weeks, while Gazan civilians express fears that Hamas will bluff the world once more. In a related story, the United States is also demanding that Israel clear the rubble from Gaza, starting in Rafah, and a senior White House envoy to the region, Tom Barak, is coming to Israel to discuss his promotion of Turkey's goal of participating in the Gaza reconstruction plan, which Israel opposes a lot. In the northern arena, the clouds cleared over the weekend and the Air Force woke up, sending a wave of strikes on Hezbollah targets in southern Lebanon. However, one strike got paused because the Lebanese army said that they were moving in to inspect the site that was about to be attacked. This is the first time that this has happened, and it might be a hopeful sign that a larger conflict can still be avoided. However, Hezbollah's leaders are still insisting that they won't voluntarily disarm, and so it seems that Israel will have to act to dismantle Hezbollah of its weapons on its own. But will Iran sit with its arms folded? And next door in Syria, 2 United States Army soldiers and an American civilian lost their lives in an encounter with ISIS terrorists, while Iran is facing its most devastating crisis yet. In Iran, a crisis more severe than ever is taking place, while former President Rouhani admitted over the weekend that Israel managed to shatter Iran into pieces. However, Israeli officials also made some revelations, including details of a global effort to increase hatred towards Israelis and Jews that could only be carried out by a state actor in a way that appears coordinated. Any guesses who is behind this plot? Let me know in the comments. Welcome to Boots on the Ground. I'm your host Yair Pinto, bringing you the whole truth about what's happening in Israel. And now, let's go over the headlines from this weekend. The IDF carried out an airstrike on Saturday evening that resulted in the elimination of Ra'ad Saad, the most senior figure in the leadership after Izzadin el-Haddad. Saad was considered the main architect of the October 7th massacre, and in recent months he was involved in rebuilding Hamas's military strength in the north of the Gaza Strip. Senior Israeli officials declared that his assassination was a response to ceasefire violations by Hamas. For their part, Hamas condemned the strike and did not say who was in the vehicle. They also issued a warning to their own members, saying that the coming hours may include escalation by Israel. You must show vigilance in movement, communication, and staying out at night. Meanwhile, the Trump administration in the United States is continuing its efforts to advance the deployment of the international stabilization forces in the Gaza Strip as early as the beginning of next month, beginning in the area under Israeli control. At the same time, a militia commander in Khan Yunis in the Gaza Strip is calling on the world not to fall into Hamas's traps again, saying that they should ignore Hamas's leaders in Qatar and invest in eastern Gaza. Shifting to the northern arena, sources in Israel and its security establishment report that they are advancing the possibility of a broad military operation in Lebanon against Hezbollah. Over the weekend, the Air Force of Israel began a wave of strikes in southern Lebanon against Hezbollah targets. And for the first time during the strikes, the Lebanese government issued a freeze request, and they wanted to examine one building in that area. And the IDF announced a temporary freeze of the attack. In the IDF, they emphasized that they will continue to monitor the target and will not allow Hezbollah to re-establish itself. However, a year since the ceasefire in Lebanon, the challenge remains disarming Hezbollah. How can Israel act on this? What is the role of the Lebanese government, and will Iran sit with its arms folded and do nothing, or will they try to interfere? Later in this report, TBN Israel's senior Middle East analyst Mati Shoshani will bring us an analysis about the gaps between Jerusalem and Washington regarding an arrangement in the Gaza Strip. He will also explain why President Trump's envoy Tom Barak, who is arriving in Israel very soon, is angering Jerusalem and prompting Turkey's agenda for the Gaza Strip. And Mati will also reveal to us how a special American force took control of a ship that was transferring military equipment from China to Iran and prevented storage, as well as details of the $35 billion gas deal between Israel and Egypt that is expected to be signed within a few days. This agreement has come due to the American pressure and against the backdrop of Israeli security demands. Prime Minister Netanyahu and Egyptian President El-Sisi may meet very soon, and Mati will have all the details for us. And elsewhere, United States Central Command announced that an ISIS terrorist fired on a joint American-Syrian patrol over the weekend. The terrorist was eliminated, but 3 Americans also lost their lives in this incident. And finally, Israeli officials have identified a global effort to increase hatred towards Israelis and Jews, and believe only state actors are capable of doing this in a way that appears coordinated. And in Jerusalem, there is no certainty that Qatar is behind this campaign, but they suspect Doha made a clear decision to destroy relations between Israel and the Trump administration. So we have a lot to talk about today. Let's dive into the details. I'm Yair Pinto, with me is Mati Shoshani, and this is your Boots on the Ground report, in which we bring you all the truth about what's happening in Israel amidst the ongoing battle against Hamas, HEZBOLLAH, the Houthis in Yemen, the Shia militias in Iraq, and all the other armed groups in this region that are taking their orders from Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, which is the head of the crumbling axis of evil in the Middle East. And a moment before we begin, we need you to help us spread the truth, so please leave a comment, hit the like button, and make sure to subscribe. That's how you help us reach more people around the world. And now, we're getting into today's news, and we'll start in the Gaza Strip, as the Air Force carried out a targeted strike Saturday evening on a vehicle in El Nabulsi Square. This is in western Gaza City, which led to the elimination of Raed Saad, which is considered number 2 in Hamas's leadership in the Gaza Strip, after Izzadin al-Haddad. The strike was carried out by firing a small missile from an unmanned aerial vehicle that hit the car that he was traveling in. And according to Palestinian reports, 4 people were terminated in this strike, and Saad was one of them. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Defense Minister Israel Katz said that the elimination was carried out in response to an attack in Khan Yunis earlier on Saturday morning. This involved an activation of an explosive device against 2 reserve IDF soldiers who were lightly wounded. It is important to point out that in recent weeks, there were several opportunities to eliminate Saad, who led Hamas's military rebuilding in the northern part of the Gaza Strip since the ceasefire. On Saturday, a high probability identification of his location above the ground was achieved, and therefore he was attacked. In the security establishment, they are expected to explain to the Americans who oppose such actions that this is a response to frequent ceasefire violations by Hamas in the form of suspicious individuals approaching the yellow line under IDF control. Furthermore, the security sources say that Saad is a terrorist with a lot of blood on his hands, and he topped the target list of the Nili team in the Shin Bet in Israel. Saad was one of the architects of the October 7th massacre and was responsible for producing the weapons that Hamas used during this event. Earlier on Saturday, the IDF spokesperson announced that yesterday, a terrorist who crossed the yellow line and posed a threat to the forces was terminated. Another terrorist who crossed with him managed to escape. For their part, after the apparent elimination of Hamas number 2, Raed Saad, Hamas published a warning call to its senior terror operatives, saying that we estimate that the coming hours may include escalation by Israel. We call on all operatives to show alertness and caution, especially in movement, communication, and being out at night. Despite all of this kinetic action, back and forth, the United States is aiming to deploy the international stabilization forces in the Gaza Strip already at the beginning of next month. And according to American sources, this will be carried out first in areas under Israeli control. And despite the ambitious plan, and even though the International Stabilization Force will not be tasked with fighting Hamas, Many countries are still avoiding sending soldiers for this mission. Reports have surfaced that the United States asked 70 different countries to send forces, but they only got a few countries willing to consider this option. However, at the same time, against the backdrop of United States President Donald Trump's plans for the Gaza Strip, the militias that oppose the terrorist organization insist that they are the best option for an alternative. Meanwhile, United States Central Command will host a conference this coming Tuesday in Doha, Qatar, with partner countries dealing with planning the international stabilization forces. Two American sources gave details to this conference to Reuters, noting that more than 25 countries are expected to send representatives to the conference, which will discuss, amongst other things, the forces' command structure. And amidst these discussions regarding the ongoing context towards moving to Phase B in President Trump's plan for the Gaza Strip, White House Special Envoy and U.S. Ambassador to Turkey, Tom Barak, is expected to arrive in Israel on Monday. During his visit, he's expected to meet with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and with additional political and security officials against the backdrop of growing and deepening gaps between Jerusalem and Washington regarding an arrangement in the Gaza Strip. In other words, this visit is expected to take place in a complex atmosphere. Barak's goal during his trip will be to try to advance the administration's position and to move the process towards Phase B, but Israeli officials have said that without direct attention to their concerns and demands, in practical, the demand to take Turkish participation in the international stabilization force off the table, it will be difficult to reach any kind of understandings. And here, at TBN Israel, we will continue to report on every development regarding the Gaza Strip, and as always, we invite you to be part of the team by sharing our videos on YouTube, following us on social media, and hitting that subscribe button if you haven't already, so that you stay tuned to the truth in real time and never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. And speaking of Boots on the Ground, I want to introduce you to one of our partners. They have had their boots on the ground here in Israel for almost 100 years, because here in Israel, emergencies don't wait. It might be a rocket attack, a stabbing, a car ramming, a pregnant woman going into labor, an elderly person having a heart attack, or a car accident. These kinds of emergencies can happen anywhere, anytime, and when they do, Magen David Adom is the first to respond. Before the cameras arrive or the story breaks, they're already there, saving lives, calming chaos, and giving people a second chance. But staying ready takes more than just courage. It takes ambulances, medical equipment, trauma supplies, trained volunteers, and armored protection, and all of that takes support. And that's where you come in. If you want to help save lives in Israel, go to savelifeisrael.com to help Magen David Adom stay strong, fast, and prepared, so when the next emergency hits, they're already on the way. Again, that's savelifeisrael.com, and help us save lives here in Israel. And now, we're getting back into the news and switching our focus to the northern arena. According to the HEZBOLLAH-linked El Mayadin media portal in Lebanon, Israeli fighter jets struck in the El Rihan areas in the Tzidon district. On the El Arabiya media portal, it was reported that at least 5 strikes were carried out in southern Lebanon. The IDF said that it struck a training and drills compound that was used by the Radwan Force Unit in the Hezbollah terrorist organization for training and preparation, including live fire drills and additional training for the use of various types of weapons for the purpose of planning and carrying out terrorist attack plans against IDF forces and against Israeli civilians. As part of the strikes, additional Hezbollah terrorist organization militia infrastructure was struck under Intelligence Directorate guidance in several areas in southern Lebanon. The existence of military training and the establishment of terrorist infrastructure for activities against Israel constitutes a violation of the understandings between Israel and Lebanon and a threat to the state of Israel. In a related story, on Saturday, the IDF issued an evacuation warning in the Yanuach area in southern Lebanon for a Hezbollah compound. After the evacuation notice, the Lebanese army approached the IDF and asked to inspect the site itself. The IDF agreed, and accordingly, the strike was paused. the IDF is under ongoing monitoring of the target and in dialogue with the mechanism, but the IDF did not allow the HEZBOLLAH terrorist organization to reestablish and strengthen itself. Of course, they will try to do so, and Naim Qassem, HEZBOLLAH's leader, is defying the United States against the backdrop of its efforts to push the Lebanese authorities to act to remove the weapons that are held by the organization. In remarks delivered on Saturday, Qassem said that the United States should know that in any scenario, HEZBOLLAH will defend itself, and that the organization will never agree to disarm, even if the whole world unites in war against Lebanon. According to him, the land, the weapons, the soul make up the entity and cannot be separated, and therefore disarming HEZBOLLAH means execution, and therefore it will not happen. This evil and ridiculous man also said that in Israel, they admit today that the achievements of the war are being eroded, and that this is natural because Israel did not manage to realize its objectives, and HEZBOLLAH continues to exist. So, what do you think about this? Do you think that HEZBOLLAH succeeded in stopping Israel? Did HEZBOLLAH succeed at all, in any way, in any shape, in any form? Let me know what you think about this in the comments section. In any case, Qassem also made an appeal to the Lebanese government saying that HEZBOLLAH is ready for full cooperation with the Lebanese army in order to leverage the military power of Lebanon and HEZBOLLAH. However, he emphasized that HEZBOLLAH is not willing to any kind of an agreement that would lead to surrender to Israel and to the United States. And here at TBN Israel, we will continue to update you, so keep spreading the truth, share, follow us, and most importantly, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so that you remain tuned to the truth in real time and never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. And now, we'll move to TBN Israel's senior Middle East analyst, Mati Shoshani, who will bring us all the details about the gaps between Israel and the United States in the diplomatic arena in recent days. We'll also examine the questions about why everyone is talking about an agreement between Israel and Egypt and what's behind it, and how all of this will affect the whole Middle East, and also what was the Chinese investment in Iran. Over to you, Mati.
That's right, we're entering into the home run stretch of Phase 2 kicking off in the Gaza Strip. We're in the death throes of what is Phase A, of the Phase A exchange between the Israeli hostages, alive and murdered, Hamas terrorists, and the retreat of the IDF forces in the Gaza Strip. And right now we're seeing the big moment, the drama, the intensity, the fighting, the political backdeals that are taking place as multiple countries fight for what the future of the Gaza Strip will look like in the months and years to come. Anyway, give us a couple of minutes and we're going to break down everything that's happening here in this land as it relates to the Gaza Strip and Phase B of Trump's great plan for the Middle East. And this is only one small piece, because the big piece is not the Gaza Strip. The big piece, of course, is the regional shift, and we'll get to that in just a few minutes. So let's get started. We are still waiting in Israel for one last hostage, one murdered hostage, Ran Gvili, to be returned to Israel. Everyone has been waiting for him to come back, and this deal doesn't move forward as far as Israel is concerned before he is back united with his family. Again, he's been murdered. He was murdered on October the 7th on the border with Gaza, but we're waiting for him to be returned to his people as Hamas committed to do, as the deal stipulates, and as people in Israel are expecting to happen. But then the big piece in the room, the big question that's hovering over everyone's head, is not just the question of how does Phase 1 end, it's who rebuilds the Gaza Strip, and how do they do that? Let me tell you a bit about the background of what's been happening. There's already a very substantial international force that is present in southern Israel. In a city called Kiryat Gat, there's an enormous logistical center that is funded by the Americans but is present by multiple countries. And they're all there working on the logistics, on the humanitarian, on the construction, on the civil engineering. It's all in the pipeline. Not only that, there's also an amassment, a buildup of the human resources that are needed to do that. We're talking about military experts, we're talking about civil experts, we're talking about people both from the Arab and Muslim world, but also outside of it, that have all gathered together to try and build up what will be the day after for the Gaza Strip. But one piece continues to be missing from the table, and that piece is, and will be apparently for the foreseeable future, the question of who the boots on the ground in the Gaza Strip are going to be. That's not going away anytime soon, and there's no clear resolution in the future. Now let me tell you why this is important. Because behind the scenes, Israel, together with the United States, have been working to try and create a solution where the Israeli forces, the IDF, can be removed from the Gaza Strip and still provide security to the people of Israel. And the United States has been working to find a people group, to find a force that is able to put boots on the ground, people with guns in their hands, that are able to stand up to Hamas and slowly transition what is now controlled by the terrorist group into an area that will be controlled by an international entity or international group unlike Hamas. That is no small feat, and I'm not exaggerating when I say that this is the most difficult piece in the entire puzzle. And why is it difficult? For two main reasons. One, Hamas is not going anywhere without putting up a fight. This terrorist organization has had a very clear agenda. They're fighting for their survival. They're not about a peace plan. They're not about a ceasefire. They don't care about Trump's 20-point plan or 30-point plan. It doesn't matter to them. They're fighting for their survival. And what their survival looks like is fighting against Israel for another day. They're not considered and they're not concerned with rebuilding the Gaza Strip. They want to make sure that tomorrow and a month from now and a year from now, they are present on the ground in Gaza to fight and harm Israelis. And if they need to kill people of Gaza on the way, so be it. They've done it many times before, and they'll continue doing it. But that's only one big piece. The second one is finding an international entity who's willing to take upon themselves putting their soldiers against Hamas. And Hamas tonight might be weakened, it might be partially disarmed, it might be disarmed in the process, but it's not gone, and it is not non-existent. And every country that knows it's going to come in knows they're going to be having to fight against Hamas. Hamas are going to ambush them, Hamas are going to try to jeopardize their operations, Hamas are going to try to kill some of their soldiers or peacekeeping forces, whatever you want to call them. They're going to try to do that time and time again until they're weakened to the point where that entity has a control over the Gaza Strip. The civil governance of the Gaza Strip, that's been done in many other countries around the world. Many conflicts have seen sort of a transition from the end of a war and the disarmament of a fighting force into a more peaceful one. But placing your people in and rebuilding a region while there's still an active terrorist organization that is opposing the forces that are trying to rehabilitate the area, now that's an entirely different story altogether, and it's a very complicated and dangerous one. Well, who's been on the sort of docket to do this? We've talked about Indonesia, we've talked about Azerbaijan, there's been even talk about the Turkish government, who time and time again keeps reminding everyone that they are the ones who want to come and help bring peace to the Middle East. I remind people every time to say that the Turkish people, or the Turkish government, can't speak on behalf of the Turkish people, but the Turkish government wants to stabilize and bring peace to this region, you have to laugh at that idea. The Turkish government has done nothing but destabilize for a very, very long time. I mean, in fact, if you zoom out and look at what they've been doing to this region, they've been causing chaos when it comes to the front with the Greek forces, both in Cyprus and Greece proper. They've been violating their airspace. They've been doing a bunch of saber rattling in a naval way throughout the Aegean Sea, and they've been trying really hard to get more of a substantial stake when it comes to Syria and to Lebanon. And these are the same people that say, oh, we'd like to come and help bring stability and peace into this region. No, thank you. The Israeli government is abundantly clear in saying, we don't want to have the Turkish in Gaza. And the problem is, who will be on the ground in the Gaza Strip? Let me just give a quick word about what it means to be a peacekeeping force in a war-torn region. This is a much more complicated endeavor than most people imagine. And I'll start with the willingness, first of all. A country that sends in its troops needs to be willing to assume that some of them will be harmed in trying to bring peace or maintain a ceasefire between two fighting forces. Usually the forces that come in are completely unrelated to the conflict that's taking place, as is the case here. So let's say the Indonesians would send in their forces to peacekeep in the Gaza Strip. They would have to do that knowing full well that they would face opposition by the terrorists in Hamas, Gaza. They would have to know that they would experience international scrutiny, and there needs to be a big enough carrot to incentivize them to do this to make it worth their time. But even if someone wants to do these kind of things, there's an enormous logistical trail that leads up to the moment where they're able to have boots on the ground. You need logistics, you need bases, you need a logistic tail, as I said, of ships and then trucks and then small bases that can supply the forces with the food, the weaponry, the equipment, the medical care, etc., 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 that all goes on to setting something like that up on the ground. Now, the American government has been pushing for these big milestone events. This needs to happen now, in the first month or the second month of the year of 2026. And Israel looks at that and says, absolutely not. We are concerned first and foremost with security on the ground, in seeing truly, fully, that there's someone who's taking care of what's happening, that the people of Israel will be safe, that they will be guarded, and we won't once again have an October 7th event in the Gaza border. And for that to happen, there needs to be a real, not a fake, not this, let's call it toy army, a real force that is able to fight and push back against Hamas and willing to do so. And up till now in this region, we've seen multiple UN forces, some of them made up, by the way, by very substantial armies from around the world that have tried to keep the peace in this region and had a very hard time doing that. Why? Because countries don't want to see casualties, because the logistics are expensive, because fighting against a terrorist organization is not fun on a good day and terrible on most days of the week. And understandably, Israel is concerned about what that day after looks like, as are these other countries. Trump White House is saying, we right now need to have a deal. We need to move forward from the Gaza Strip. People are losing attention. Time is running out. We need to do it now. And Israel says, that's all good and well. We're cooperating. We're your friends. But we're not going to move forward without real security. And until that peace comes into the place, we're going to continuously be in this moment of tension between the American White House and Prime Minister Netanyahu's war office, war cabinet here in Israel. We're not going to be able to find mutual ground until there's a clear and present plan to move forward in the Gaza Strip. Now, the Americans have been very creative. The US government has been abundantly creative in trying to find solutions for this problem. Here's what they've done. We're now hearing in Israeli press, this has been over a week now at this point, talks about an upcoming deal between the Egyptians and the Israelis. And what is the deal? A $35 billion natural gas deal between Egypt, Israel, and probably several other countries. Now, we're not entirely clear on what this deal is, but it likely has to do with the export of natural gas from Egypt through Israel, maybe back and forth between the two countries, and probably an export deal to Europe, which is something Israel has been talking about with the Cypriot government for several months now as we speak, and actually several years if you think about the, let's call it the trade deals that have been taking place before this war started out. So what this is really the American government putting pressure on the Israeli government to somehow lock in the Egyptians into a regional deal. And Israel looks at this and says, this is great. We'd love to be part of a deal with the Egyptians where they're locked in to maintain the peace on the Gaza border, especially from the Philadelphia corridor side, which is the southwestern side of the Gaza corridor as it enters into the Sinai Peninsula. So Israel looks at them and says, we were definitely happy to be part of this deal, but we're happy to be part of it when we've seen clear and real steps, not something vague, not words on a page. We want to see steps on the ground, and we want them over time, and then and only then are we willing to move forward. So it seems we're at a bit of an impasse, but not really. What we're looking at now is sort of the crunch time of bringing forward the countries that will be part of the long-term deal. We talked about the Turkish interest. We've talked in the past about the Qataris as they're trying to get involved here. And Egypt, I think, is a really big piece of this entire deal in both peacekeeping and also stabilizing the region. But the reason this is all so important, the reason all countries, and especially the Trump White House, is putting so much emphasis on this, the reason for that is because this is the first domino in a long series of dominoes. Without Gaza, there's no deal in Lebanon and in Syria. I mean, they might move forward, but they're looking at this and they want to see, can the United States, in its sort of new hat as the good guy, the sheriff in town in the Middle East, can they change the pathway that has been set before us? Can they break the vicious cycle that was created and presented by the Iranians so many times over so many years? Are they going to be able to build and not just fight? Those are some really tough questions that require a lot of work. They require an incredible amount of grit and back-channel diplomacy to bring forth. And that's where we are right now. We're in the sticky, in the complicated, in the unpleasant, in the difficult phase of trying to build up what's here in the Middle East into the next phase. So here's what the next days and weeks are going to look like. They could go very, very well. We might be able to lock in a partner that will have boots on the ground. That might be the Azerbaijanis, that might be the Indonesians, it might be a mixture of other countries. I don't know. But the point is is that when that happens, much of the logistics and the nation-building efforts are already on the ground to move forward at speed in the Gaza Strip. But it has to happen with Hamas weakened and eventually and ultimately removed from control in the Gaza Strip. And when that lines up, things start falling into place. Lebanon can look at that and say, look, this is a party, this is a government that's worth betting on, worth partnering with. The Syrian government, Ashara, looks at this and says, we might as well align with the Americans, and the list goes on and on and on and on, all the way to Tehran, where the Iranian government can look at this and say, this is someone we need to fear. Let's hold back on the nuclear program. Let's hold back on regional disruption until the moment where Trump is no longer in the White House. And yes, it is that significant. If we lock in the Gaza situation, it sends ripple effects throughout the Middle East, showing that the American government has the power not only to fight, but also to bring to tow, to bring into this negotiation, to this next day picture, multiple countries around the world in more than just a symbolic gesture, in committing soldiers on the grounds, asset on the ground, and a substantial financial investment into what's happening here. And that is something incredible that could just happen before us. The problem is, Israel is concerned that there's also another alternative future. And in that future, there might not be someone else that has boots on the ground, and Israel continues to sort of muck around in Gaza, and then by extension in Lebanon and in Syria, and the outposts we have there. And this goes on until the next round of violence. The Israeli government is concerned about that, both from a financial perspective, but also for a defense perspective. We want to see stability. We want to see nation building. We want to see an establishment of more stable governments in our region, because that's what gives us stability. That's what gives us a partner to negotiate with. So again, there's a lot on the table right now, and much of it is pending on being able to lock in that partner that is needed for the Gaza Strip for the day after, and everything else falls into place once that picture is locked in, once that next step is clarified, once everything is clear that it's going in that direction. Now back to you, Pinto.
Thank you very much, Mati, for bringing us the full truth about this situation. And here at TBN Israel, we will continue to report on every development on this issue. So keep spreading the truth, share, and follow us. And most importantly, do not forget to click that subscribe button if you haven't already, so you stay tuned to what's happening in Israel, boots on the ground style. And now, we're shifting our focus to the northern arena. The Pentagon announced on Saturday evening that 2 American soldiers and a civilian interpreter were fatally wounded by gunfire during a joint patrol in the Palmyra area in the Syrian desert. 3 additional United States soldiers were wounded in this incident, along with several Syrian soldiers, while Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said that the attacker was eliminated by partner forces. Syria's official news agency, SANA, reported that the United States helicopters evacuated the wounded soldiers to a United States military base in the El Tanaf area near the border with Iraq. The incident occurred during a patrol by the Syrian security forces and American coalition forces led by the United States that are deployed in Syria to fight ISIS. Last month, Reuters reported that the United States intends to deploy military forces at an airport in Damascus to enforce a possible security arrangement between Syria and Israel. And according to Reuters, the base is located near areas in southern Syria that Israel demands be demilitarized as part of a security arrangement that would replace the 1974 disengagement of forces arrangement, which collapsed after the fall of the previous Syrian president, Bashar al-Assad's regime. President Trump addressed the event on his Truth social media network, saying, "We mourn the 3 great patriots that we lost in an ambush in Syria. The United States will respond with strength." The United States Special Envoy to Syria, Tom Barak, also condemned this incident, saying, "We mourn the loss of 3 brave American military and civilian service members and wish a speedy recovery to the Syrian soldiers that are wounded in this attack. We remain committed to defeating terror together with our Syrian partners." The soldiers were part of a force numbering several hundreds of Americans who have been deployed in Syria since the beginning of the war against ISIS. Guys, do you get that? ISIS is still alive. Will America deepen its involvement in Syria because of this incident? Or will it lead to the evacuation of United States forces from Syria that President Trump has hinted in the past he wishes to speed up? Let me know what you think in the comment section. And here at TBN Israel, we will continue to spread the truth, so join us and send our content to as many people as possible. Click the like button, leave a comment, and of course, if you're not following us yet, now is the time. Look for the subscribe button so that you remain tuned to the truth in real time and never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. And now we are switching our focus to an issue of global proportions. Israel's political leadership has recently been dealing intensely with an anti-Semitic and anti-Israel campaign on social media, as well as on campuses across the West. Israel has no certainty that Doha in Qatar is behind it, but the issue greatly troubles Jerusalem. Qatar made massive investments in higher education in the West over the last few decades, and they didn't spend all that money for no reason or without a plan for what they hope to get in return. In any case, Israel's government has identified a broad global and primarily artificial effort, meaning engineered, not authentic, to increase resentment and hatred towards Israelis and against Jews. The emphasis is on the word artificial. Professionals became convinced that only state actors with large influence and organizations accompanied by intelligence organizations or several private influence firms hired by a state are capable of carrying out actions that are happening around the world in a way that looks coordinated and timed. The campaign certainly is coordinated, and it is not only bots and fake online accounts, but also the activation of key figures against Israel. Once again, the prime suspects are Qatar and/or other actors in the Arab world, as well as Russia or even China. But whoever is behind it, it is global and orchestrated, and it causes serious harm to Israel. One should not exaggerate the importance of this campaign. However, most of the damage to Israel's reputation stems from much simpler reasons. The war in Gaza caused enormous destruction in the Gaza Strip and large numbers of casualties amongst Palestinian civilians. This is difficult to explain, even without an artificial state-driven campaign to stir up anger against Israel. A senior Israeli official said that in Jerusalem, they suspect Qatar made a fundamental decision to try to destroy the relations between Israel and the Trump administration from the root, to ruin. They are in jihad. So he said, against the backdrop of the interview of Qatar's Prime Minister Mohammed al-Tahini with the American right-wing figure Tucker Carlson, in which he declared that Qatar will not pay for Gaza's reconstruction because it will not rebuild what Israel destroyed. In the same interview, al-Tahini also stated that we do not consider what is happening a ceasefire. A ceasefire will not be completed until a complete withdrawal of the IDF from the Gaza Strip. This is a statement that seemingly grants legitimacy to the renewal of Hamas attacks against the IDF in the Gaza Strip. Later, a Qatari spokesperson softened its prime minister's remarks about rebuilding the Gaza Strip, clarifying that he meant only that Qatar will not fund alone the reconstruction of Gaza, but that it is ready to do so together with other countries. This is a strange clarification, a 180-degree change, and maybe someone got a phone call from Washington. In any case, here at TBN Israel, we will continue to bring you the full truth, and we will fight against all the lies that are being spread about Israel. So, please, join us in prayer for IDF soldiers wherever they are. Pray for wisdom to our leaders, to your leaders. Pray for all the innocent lives that are affected by these wars that are going on in this region. Let's pray for our enemies to start loving the Jewish people of Israel instead of sending rockets, sending flowers, or something like that. Let's pray for the peace of Jerusalem. Shalom from Jerusalem. We light the first candle tonight of Hanukkah during a time when Israel is still walking through a very difficult war season. And just like in the days of the Maccabees, it begins with one small light, one act of faith.
That's right, Hanukkah is about standing firm when everything around you feels unstable. And in these months, we've all felt exactly that. But the miracle of the oil reminds us God keeps His people even when resources look too small, too weak, and too late.
So come on, Mati, let's say the blessing of lighting the first candle. You want to have the honors?
We can say it together.
Okay. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם אשר קידשנו במצוותיו וציוונו להדליק נר של חנוכה. אמן. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם שעשה ניסים לאבותינו בימים ההם בזמן הזה. Amen.
There's a third one because it's the first night, and we do this also on the last one. It's the Chiyanu one.
Yeah.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam שהחיינו וקיימנו והגיענו לזמן הזה. Amen.
That's a tough one, by the way,
We almost
guys.
got it. Almost got it.
So what did we just say, Mati?
Blessed are you, our Lord, or King of the universe, that commanded us to light candles of Hanukkah. We're not exactly commanded, but it is a tradition. The second blessing is who did miracles to our fathers in those days and in these days, which we know to be true.
Exactly.
And the third one, which you say on the first night and the last night, is the one who brought us back to life, who sustained us and brought us to this day. It's a good blessing.
No, amazing. Yeah, we've seen throughout these 2 years of war that God is doing amazing miracles in these days, and He did them in the past. So He's a faithful God back
Absolutely.
then and today.
Yeah, we always tell our kids, remember what they did to our forefathers and how God saved us. Well, this time around, I'm not sure this is a positive thing, it's just reality. It's not what they did to our forefathers, it's what they did to us and how God saved us in this time. And this year, it's more symbolic than ever before.
So guys, be encouraged that God is alive and He's performing biblical level miracles today. Shalom from Jerusalem.